All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us for this, our inaugural conference. And special thanks to our speakers, Daisy Hernandez and Olivia Nottebohm, for joining us this morning. We all can appreciate how crazy it is to be running a public company in 2020. By way of background, Daisy is a Senior Vice President of Strategy and Operations at Zora, which she joined in January of this year after more than a decade at SAP. And for that time at both Business Objects and BEA. Olivia is the Chief Operating Officer of Dropbox, which she joined in February of this year, following 5.5 years at Google as the VP of S&B Sales and Go-to-Market for GCP. And prior to that, spent 15 years at McKinsey. So to kick things off, I'd like to ask each of you to describe your journey through your role today. And Daisy, if you wouldn't mind getting us started, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I started January of this year. And so it's been an interesting time to start a new role, start a new company, because it was 11 months for me yesterday. So 9 of those months I've been in shelter in place. And suffice it to say, it's been an interesting experience trying to ramp up while also taking on a role that didn't exist prior to me joining. There's some advantages to that. One advantage is everything that my whole perspective has to be present and forward-looking. And so I have been trying to rally, everybody in terms of trying to focus on the future, which is sometimes challenging, right? In some cases, I don't know what I'm missing. And so that's been helpful. But yes, ramping up has been a great experiment, to say the least. But very happy at Zora.
Cool. Olivia?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks again for having us, and just so excited for all the folks who are taking part in this conference. What an exciting time to be building a company right now. So huge congrats to all of you who are working so hard to do that. I also joined earlier this year, just as Daisy's experience was. I think I had 3 weeks. I had reached San Francisco, Austin, and New York, and the plane got turned around and we went into shelter in place on March 6th and quickly moved into Chief COVID Officer and started making decisions on a daily basis about how we would take care of our employees and our customers. So it's been quite a ride. I am thinking about marketing and sales and business development and channel and business strategy and operations. And so really thinking about bringing all of those teams together and driving the engine for Dropbox. You asked why Dropbox? It was really because I was excited about going on this journey about the future of work. And little did I know that it would be so germane to the world situation just a month after I joined.
Yeah, for sure. Your light story makes me think, there will literally be books written about the week of March 16, 2020, and the fact that you both joined companies, a month or 2 months prior. Ask the most obvious stuff, and then take us back to March. Can you just share what stands out as the most pernicious challenges that you were facing going into the lockdown, and how did you each go about tackling them? Maybe Olivia, if you wouldn't mind taking that one first.
Sure. First and foremost, we were thinking about our customers. So we were thinking about how did we make sure that our technology would help them. It was obviously a boot camp in remote distributed team working. And it was a situation where many CIOs had been convincing or trying to work with their teams to say, hey, we can really do this remote work. You can work from home if you want. And all of a sudden overnight, it became very real. So we were working with our customers to make sure the deployments were going easy. We were scaling the extent of the deployments overnight. We had a publishing company that overnight went completely virtual, and we had to enable that. There were so many situations. We were also helping the Italian Red Cross make sure that they could take care of all of the files they needed. We were helping customers apply for PPP loans through HelloSign. So it was this massive explosion of things that we were trying to help our customers on. And there were some situations where they couldn't pay, right? So working through that. And then on the employee side, we had quickly to drive to clarity for our employees, right? We all know that the number one stress for employees is uncertainty. And so we were trying to give them as much advance warning. We were, as I was saying, meeting daily in terms of trying to make those decisions that would give them clarity and certainty, and working through what was needed there. And then we were also thinking about the future of work. So what does this all turn into, and how do we make sure that our products are enabling the work that now this whole set of knowledge workers need to move into this paradigm, and what does that look like?
Right.
Yeah, that's going to be fun to talk about. I think we're going to spend most of our time on that, which will be fun, but that's awesome. Daisy, yeah, when you guys are staring down the barrel of lockdown, what did that look like for you at Zora?
Right. Well, very similar to Dropbox. For us, for Zora, we wanted to make sure, similarly, we had a program called Operation Bear Hug, where we're bear hugging our customers, and because we want to make sure that not only does our software help our customers with their subscription businesses, whether they're launching or managing or expanding, but we're also providing the expertise that they would need, because it's more than just about the technology for us. It's also, can we give you free training courses just to refresh your memory on what changes you have to make? Because if anything was very clear about 2020, the best way to manage through uncertainty and change is making sure that we are agile, and making sure that we're helping our customers as well. And also giving perspective and providing benchmarks and information about what other companies are also going through in their specific industry. So very similar to Dropbox, I'm sure most of us were thinking, how do we make sure that we can provide what we can for our customers? As far as a leadership team, definitely having to think through and rethinking, how do we not try to replicate face-to-face, but rethink it altogether in terms of an engagement. Us as a leadership team had to gel real quickly and just be clear on the decisions that we had to make. But also, how do we engage the next level of leadership and create a community such that, in a forum, and we were meeting every week with them, aside from the daily COVID meetings and executive meetings, but the next level of leadership, because they are going through their own changes and challenges too. And they wanted a safe place where they didn't feel like they were projecting on their teams, but also being able to share what worked, what didn't work, in terms of making sure that people are feeling supported, because it's more than just about COVID. There are a lot of different things socially that happened this year. A lot of people, economically as well as health-wise. And so making sure that we are listening and adjusting was really key, versus always tell.
Yep, that's such a great way to frame it. I'm reminded of that BBC reporter who had his kid running through the background, this 6-7 years ago, and his wife sort of chasing the kids back down, and sort of that wouldn't have been forgiven, if you will, in a Zoom meeting a year ago, and now everyone's like, hey, say hi to your kid, and just this sort of your point around sort of how do you support these executives and your team. I'm seeing some questions already from the group. In fact, one from Jason Baumgarten at Spencer Stewart. I'm just going to weave it in because it's such a good one and so timely. But how are each of you keeping your own positive energy and leadership vibes up? Like, what do you go to in terms of being able to kind of be restored, so you're not falling off a cliff with all the stuff and the stresses?
Well, first of all, hi, Jason. Nice to see you or hear from you. Well, it is a really important question. And I would say even more important in the role modeling element of it. You don't realize it, but it becomes very real. So I was pacing at 10 to 11 hours of Zoom meetings at one point, and I just called a timeout. And I sat with my executive team and I said, hey, from now on, I'm gonna limit the Zoom hours, and it's gonna be down to 7 and everything else is just going to be on the phone. And we're going to have one-on-ones, and I want you to go for a walk. I want you to take your dog. I want you to breathe the fresh air. We had a little bit of challenge there where we didn't have some fresh air to breathe, but we all have to do this. And I sent a note out to all of my teams saying that I was doing this and really trying to role model, like, we all have permission to take the time we need to re-energize. And I would be very open about the fact that I would arrive at a 9 o'clock meeting, like still in my workout gear, saying like, I just had an awesome run, and I'll probably use my lunch break to shower. So ignore me and now I'm coming across until then, right? Because people just had to be given permission that it was okay to take care of themselves, that this is a marathon that we were running. This wasn't a sprint. We were going to be in this kind of for the long haul. And that, I think, was a really important element as well. So it wasn't really only just for myself, but also communicating that out to the rest of the organization as well.
Modeling this is so important. So they don't think that they're an outlier for taking care of themselves. Daisy, how about you? How do you stay strong through all this?
Yeah. So for me personally, when I am, like many, still struggling with the boundaries. I'm not sure if it's because I feel like I'm still getting up to speed. So I find my energy and leadership positivity in different ways. For me, it's been connecting and being just a listening ear for folks who are going through their own challenges, feeling like they're heard. And because sometimes they're not looking for people to solve their issues, but just feeling like they're getting some empathy. And I realize that what maybe works for me, or what my concerns are not the same of others. And that was also a great personal reflection for me personally. Just hearing, it's like, oh, maybe we should be asking more questions, and making it okay for people to talk about some of these things, not pressuring them, but just making sure that, and also sharing some of my own challenges so that they can see, oh, we're all human. We're all going through things.
Very cool. So you both alluded to this before, and we've all been talking about the future of work for more than a decade, for some of us much more than a decade. And then it just happened in 6 months. I'm curious, what do each of you like most about this new reality? Maybe Olivia, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Well, I think one of the things that Daisy said is very true, right? Which is, it all of a sudden makes everyone more human, and hopefully puts everyone in much more of a listening mode, which is, we're all here to understand this experience that really is unprecedented, that the entire globe is going through it, right? So I'm on a Zoom with my team in Sydney, and we're talking about the same topic as when I'm on a Zoom with leaders in Japan, or leaders in the UK or Latin America, right? So it also is this very unifying element to it, but that's the part that I just think work has become more human. And that is the part that I really value. I wish we didn't have to get it through this means, but I genuinely feel like people are able to be more vulnerable at work, or at least that's the culture that we've hopefully tried to create. There's still ways to go, right? It's not perfect, but we really have, just as Daisy said, tried to make it a listening culture, tried to make it a time where people can be vulnerable. We, leaned into mental health issues. We gave, elements, we gave ability for people to access that mental health, and tried and really made sure to take any stigma away from it. It's also, as Daisy was saying, a time where we were already in this motion of really listening to each other. And then we had all of the social issues, and Black Lives Matter. It was a topic that, like, obviously we had to talk about as a company, right? I think in the past, this has been like, you get in a car, you drive to work and you drive home, and company topics are company topics. And then what's going on in the real world are afar. And because of Daisy's point of this intermingling, we really leaned into talking about the topics that people were talking about throughout the course of their day, regardless of whether it was work related or just life. And so that to me has been really special. Again, I wish we didn't have to go through this to get here, but it's been really, really meaningful.
Yep. What is the Paul Romer saying? A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So yeah, in some senses, making some meaning out of this. There's a question that we'll get to later, Nitya asked, which is related to your point around racial justice and equity. Maybe we'll bookmark about that one for later because you touched on it. But Daisy, how about you? When you think about this new reality and the future of work, what do you most like about it?
It has forced us to get creative, to build upon the idea of listening. We've had to think of ways to bring it out from people, right? So we've used our current tools or even thought of other digital tools and use them in different ways. Let me give you an example. We use G Suite. So we have Sheets, and we are building ways where people can either vote or they can brainstorm, and we can collect information at the same time, and trying different techniques because everyone communicates differently too. And it's been fascinating lesson on organizational effectiveness and really thinking through and kind of assessing, okay, what worked, what didn't work? Are we looking for people who are not engaging and trying to figure out why is that? And making sure that we're reaching out or figuring out different techniques to draw it out. We've even used little things like if there are 3 things to vote on, right? Okay, everybody think about what they want to vote on. These are the 3 choices. Have it in your head, put it in the chat, and then on the count of 3, everyone hit click, because we want people to feel like they have an equal and shared voice. And so for me, what's been fascinating is also not just communicating, but the different ways that we have to communicate too, because we don't have the luxury of the physical or nonverbal cues unless you're looking for it. So if anything, that has been the biggest learning and one that I find fascinating about this whole thing.
Yeah. You're reminding me, I think GitLab have written a little bit about this, but the way they run meetings is if you have one person, this is pre-COVID, if there was one person who was remote, then everyone had to be remote. So even if there was a conference room full of a dozen people, if there was one person who had to be calling in or zooming in, then all the other 11 basically had to go and kind of back to their office and zoom in so that it felt like it was an even playing field. And this was obviously pretty enlightened pre-COVID, but I think there is something special, I think, about taking away some of the sort of the asymmetry of that. There's also something very hard, which we'll get to in a minute, which is around sort of how do you do the more collaborative, creative work. So the coming out of this, what are the 2 or 3 most critical challenges that are unsolved that you guys haven't figured out at Zora and at Dropbox related to this remote work?
That's a good one. How to keep it fresh. What worked when we were first going into shutdown is, you get all this excitement. I don't know about everybody else, but everyone had like the happy hour and everyone was like, let's get to happy hour. And after a while, that kind of fizzled out because people were also tired of being on Zoom. And so going back to what I shared earlier about creating this community, people were finding, well, why don't we think about people's interests? So there's a virtual book club, there's a meditation, a daily meditation. For us, the challenge is keeping on top of just the sentiment, because there are many things that happened in 2020, not just COVID, that have added to things. And so making sure that we continue to have a pulse, I think that will always be something that we never solve because it's always changing.
Yep. How about you, Olivia? What's still unsolved?
Yes, well, so much. I would say one is we are seeing that unfortunately hours overall have gone up, right? We commissioned a study with the economists, and you see universally more meetings, more email, right? And so we're thinking very proactively about how do you get a handle on that, and how do you actually take entire company days off? How do you change email protocol? How do you really make sure meetings are only had in critical situations or for really important conversations versus a live chat on the phone? And then the other one I would say is miscommunication, right? Which is, here we are leading these teams. We're still trying to get business results. We still have to launch new initiatives. We still have to set the strategy for 2021. And we need to be communicating both with our customers and our employee base. And so how do we make sure that we really, really nail that? And in this frame, as Daisy mentioned, it's different, right? We're learning different forms of communication, and it's to different audiences. So really deeply thinking about how we communicate. I once worked with someone who would say repetition doesn't spoil the prayer. I think I've learned that more than ever. I don't think I've ever sent so many team emails in my life, and yet in this situation, communication is more important than ever. And then the final one, and this is a really hard one, is just that feeling of disconnectedness, right? I think it's different, as you mentioned, like the BitLab example, right? And we're also moving to virtual first. Super excited about that paradigm. That means something completely different when at night you get to go out and have a beer with friends and then you're working from your home, right? But the world we're living in now is that people just do not have that human connectedness that they are yearning for.
Yeah.
Right? And so how do we still get that? Like, how do we still get the tender moments, the vulnerable moments? And we're trying. We're really trying because we really believe it's important.
Yeah, and it's really hard also. There's just something about the tactile too. I was mentioning, we were having this discussion the other week, but there's something about the physical process of consuming and processing information. So I can't tell you how many times I was like, I just want to grab something and whiteboard. And so
yes, exactly.
There's that. I don't know, it's primal or what, but there's just this need of the physical part, which is why, Olivia, you're mentioning that making sure that people are walking around during meetings. Definitely there's a connection between physical activity, movement of some sort, and processing of information.
So Daisy reminded me, so I think it was maybe 2 weeks into lockdown, and because I was sitting in the same spot every day, staring at Zoom, doing the same thing, Olivia, you mentioned sort of 10 hours, 11 hours, I realized so much of my processing and my memory is related to space. And in fact, when I'd look back on these days, I'd be like, it was just this one big schmear of meetings, and I couldn't remember, what happened in which meeting. And so I think this kinesthetic point that you bring up, Daisy, I think is really important. I'll say one other thing, which is, and I think back on my early days as a product designer at IDEO, where there was this mix of the highly collaborative, very creative group work in front of a whiteboard, a wall of, a room full of whiteboards. And then there was this more introverted individual execution once you'd converged on the building. And by the way, the space in between those was, there was a big meeting, and then a few people stayed late, 3 or 4, a product manager and a couple of engineers. And then they actually figured out what they were going to go build. And then they built this prototype quietly without telling anyone what they were doing. And I'm pretty confident that just is not happening in the same ways today. And so I think, while the introverts working on kind of the projects that were already defined are probably loving some of this, the extroverts and the ambiverts who kind of need that sort of tension between the two are not. Are you guys seeing and hearing this from your heads of product and marketing, particularly those disciplines where there's more kind of generative work happening? And how are you then catalyzing the de novo projects and that creative work?
So yes, this is a challenge for sure. And I would like to say that we've solved it, but we have not. We're working on it. I think we're committed to having a learning mindset. And whiteboarding is a critical piece on the PM side, on the marketing side. Even myself, I love getting in front of a whiteboard, right? And working with my CMO on imagining things that we can do, et cetera. And so we have been using some of the startups out there who just have fantastic whiteboarding products, right? And which I was messing around with them when I was at Google Cloud, but now they're part of our workflow. So I encourage all of those of you who are working on collaboration solutions to keep going, right? Because they really are getting better and they're becoming more and more germane to how we do it. And then all of us are using different technologies and trialing them out. And it's okay. Like you'll be in a meeting and someone says, hey, I'm using this new technology where it records and transcribes meetings so I can really try to stay focused in the meeting and not get this meeting fatigue while also typing notes, et cetera. And there's just this open enjoyment of like, yeah, tell me how it goes. Let me know, right? So we're constantly working. And then, of course, we're trying to translate that to our own product, right? Which is how do we make this as seamless as possible? How do we make integrations with other third-party apps as seamless as possible? So the fragmentation that we're experiencing just as individuals, because we've got personal and work life all coming together, we're trying to really simplify it down when you're on the Dropbox platform. So you're not going in and out of different applications as you're trying to execute against your workflow. So we're both trying to solve it for ourselves, and then we're trying to kind of eat our own dog food, or as one of our board members says, drink our own champagne, and really make sure that we're embodying it in the products as well and in the product development cycle.
Very cool. Daisy, how about you? How are you guys making creative work happen?
Same thing, experimenting, using sticky note type tools like Mural or Miro. Also, to build upon that, no, we haven't solved it. We're still struggling. It's the reason why we've had to start getting really creative about brainstorming sessions and the right framing, the right setup, and more importantly, let's just focus on like the goal. Let's not focus too much on the structure, because sometimes that can weigh down on the creative thinking. And instead, why don't we think about those thought-provoking questions that will just get it out? And you know what? It's going to be messy. You have to remember, it was messy when we were face-to-face. So don't mistake the Zoom or whatever other web conferencing that you're using, because sometimes that gives you a false impression that everything is super structured, right? And so people feel confined.
And fits in a tiny little box.
Exactly.
This innovation's not fitting in a Brady Bunch box, for sure.
Right. And so we've been putting a lot of thought into it, but I can't tell you how many times I've heard colleagues say, I just wish that we could just get together and eat and, and sometimes brainstorming is, we grab some food, we camp out. Sometimes, it's also the off the grid stuff that you do to unlock some of that creativity. But same thing, we're just trying different things, but also making it okay that we're experimenting too.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, we started experimenting with what we called patio pitches back. It must have been kind of June, July timeframe, where you'd sort of get together outside at a distance, and then walking meetings. I think I've been at Windy Hill more in the last 8 months than probably the last 20 years. So maybe just shifting gears, and we'll start weaving some of the questions that are coming out of Transom in after this. But both of your companies existed for more than a dozen years before you joined them. I think both were founded in 2007. And they were very much in-person cultures. And I'm pretty sure no one on your teams had ever heard of the term shelter in place. I certainly had not. So what's materially different today about creating culture in this environment? And how have you guys each done this in your companies? When you're trying to not just sort of tread water, but actually create kind of new culture. I mean, you talked about some of the initiatives that you, but how do you create culture when you don't interview people in person, or mentor them in person? Their first day on the job isn't with their manager in person. But what are you doing to create culture? Maybe Olivia, if you wouldn't mind starting.
It's a really important question, and one we think a lot about. And for multiple reasons. One is we have to get through this period of time. And we also have committed to going virtual first permanently. So it's a question that we're having to answer now, but it's also one that will be our reality in perpetuity. And so we thought very deeply about what are the facets of our culture that we really value, and we want to make sure we continue to thread through now during shelter in place, but also in the future in a virtual first setting? And then what are the aspects of our culture that actually now is an opportunity for us to shed, right? And now is an opportunity as we switch into new frameworks, into new paradigms that we're able to push through. Mm-hmm. And so we've thought about how and why people feel connected at work. And we've come up with really a set of various things that we are going to be doubling down on, right? So first is obviously the relationship and the cultural signals that you got from your manager. So understanding how do you onboard and train managers in this environment when they are new to the company? And then how do you continue to train managers with manager offsites that are virtual, right? So really leaning into that. The third is what we call ERGs, so groups of employees who have something in common, right? So whether it's the Dropbox based on race, based on gender, we have certain identity groups that are come together, and the programming that's done for it is truly amazing. And each of us on staff is an executive sponsor for each of those 8 groups that we have. And we dedicate entire months to each of those groups, and we do programming for the entire month, and everyone has like the Dropbox background that celebrates that month. So we really lean into those. And then the third element is what we do universally across the company to set culture from like a communication. So we have our values, but we really want to be making sure to be underscoring those values, because again, as people are onboarding, they're not walking past the poster in the office that has the values and shows an example of it, right? So this is again where repetition doesn't spoil the prayer. So we've launched awards to celebrate those who embody those values and in the actions they've taken for the company. And then I would also say in all of this, and this has been an immense learning for me at Dropbox, which is you have to put your money where your mouth is. You have to fund headcount, and I'm getting very pragmatic here, but you actually have to have people whose full-time job is to think about this stuff. And I've lived in worlds where it was like nights and weekends of various people, and it just doesn't get done to the level that it can get done. And I have to say, one of the things that I was blown away by at Dropbox is we have a 12-person DEI team. And each executive staff member has a dedicated DEI person that's mapped to them. And we have a DEI person who thinks about DEI only for people onboarding. And immense amount of thoughtfulness and real work gets done. And it's truly differentiated. And you see it in the soapbox scores. I see these, like my manager cares about DEI. These scores are like in the 90s. I've never seen this before at a company. And I really attribute it to the dedication that Drew has made in terms of resourcing this. And and it's a learning that I will always take with me. Like, you just have to resource this. If you mean it and you want to do something about it, then you got to put people against it, because everyone has good intentions, but it's really hard. Everyone also has a day job. So we haven't solved it, by the way, but really.
But make it somebody's day job and it'll happen. That's awesome. Yeah, if you make it somebody's day job, it sounds like, or a dozen people's day job, it's going to happen. There's a question on this, so I'm glad you hit it. Daisy, what about you? How are you creating culture in this environment?
Right. So I'm just going to lean in and just say one thing I'm super proud of is the community we have and with this community, because a lot of the things that Olivia shared are very in line with some of the things that we're doing. So it's nice to hear how much we share across our community. And I think it's forums like this that help, because that exchange of what works, what doesn't work is really important. So I'm gonna go with what's additive, just to overly be repetitious. We just recently hired our chief diversity officer, and that was something that was extremely important to us. But one of the other things that has been a really big help. And I don't know if it was kismet or what, but we happened to have hired organizational effectiveness expertise in-house, which I personally actually never worked with prior to Zuora. And they happened to start before COVID. And so I'm thinking, did this just happen? A great coincidence, but definitely going, just reiterating the importance of having people who that's their job to wake up in the morning and having to help us rethink, and partnering across our executive staff, as well as the next level of leadership, to help think about different ways that we can engage and make sure that we're inclusive in different ways. The other thing that was just added to that is the fact that we have been, celebrating the culture that we want to keep, but a lot of our norms are implicit. And we've been making it a point to actually talk about and revisit what our norms are. And norms are, what are the behavioral ways that we want to engage and interact? Because one, it was a great refresher to have, to make sure that we are all wanting to work in a certain way. Let me give you an example. Cherish our team time. Come prepared. And another one was one team. We think about Zuora customers and the company. Those may seem very basic, but having like that laundry list where people are thinking about what's important to them and how we want to work together, and then having a discussion on what's the most important, helps level set and create that culture, because culture is also about how we work together and an agreement in which we want to do that. So I found that was also something that was really helpful for us, is just let's pause for a minute, right? Because we have to rethink what our norms are, because they may not be the same.
You said something super important about meetings that I want to sort of highlight and underline in bold, which is the fact that, at least in the old days, a meeting, if you were together, like maybe you got to see somebody and you had some, there's some connection to it. A bad meeting over Zoom is so much worse than a bad meeting in person. And when you think about the fact that 2/3 of meetings don't have an agenda, super scary. So this notion of like, if we're going to be together, let's make it really worth it. And come prepared, as you say, come with an agenda. Let's have some clarity around what we're trying to achieve here. And I think that's hopefully something that's going to stick with us.
Not to mention, if we're done with the meeting and we end early, that's okay. We don't have to fill it.
Exactly.
So we're done. Yes. Okay. We're not going to take it personally. Thank you. And we give back 15 minutes. And
totally.
That being repetitive is also what helps change the culture.
I want to maybe shift to some of the questions that have come in. As one, actually, I think we've covered some pieces of the others, but I'll ask this one of you, Olivia, what is the one change at Dropbox you'd like to see from IT in the next 12 months serving your customers and your employees?
That's a great question. I have to say our CIO is amazing. She is incredible, and her team is just fantastic. And it was seamless. We decided on a Friday, March 8th, that we would no longer be coming into the office. And the following Monday, and it was a global decision, right? And it was next Monday, everyone was on Zoom. So I have to say, I just have huge amount of respect for that team. They've just done yeoman's work. And it's hard to think of other things they need to do. I think that as this reality of remote and distributed teams evolves, I think it's interesting to think about, right? Well, you still see a proliferation of best in breed products, right? And point solutions. And how do you allow your teams to experiment and use those things, just like I was talking about before, but also make sure, that you're keeping to a budget, right? You can't be spending on every single thing that everyone would like to try. And also have a process by which you are making decisions and then committing to what teams will be using. And so we're working through that now, and they're being very thoughtful about, how do we allow for experimentation, but instead of it billowing like this, that there's this expansion, but then we solidify, expansion, and then we solidify. And so we're working through that, but really it's been amazing. I mean, in some ways is when we think about our customers, we are IT for our customers, right? Because we are this platform that our customers are using to collaborate on files, to move content back and forth, to enable their workflows, right? And so on that, we're very proud, like, in terms of our uptime and our, like, literally on the back end, what it's taking from our infrastructure team to be allowing 600 million users to be using our product, right? So that, again, they've done yeoman's work, and I really have no to-dos for them other than just to kind of congratulate them and give them an atta-girl and an atta-boy.
Oh, it's great to hear. So last question that attempts to sort of sweep together a bunch of the ones that were asked, and you guys have, I think, already answered in part some of them. But if we shift to sort of 2 to 3 years out, we're back together at whatever it is, FC Build 2022 or 23. We've all got herd immunity. We're probably getting COVID-19 vaccinations, kind of like we get flu shots, except they're mandatory. What are going to be some of the more permanent cultural and operational norms that were catalyzed by this that will be sticking with us, that just we will never go back to?
I can give it a shot first. One is it's clear that, okay, so one of the things that we've done is we've actually planned more, not less. Sometimes and that's definitely not going to change. We've always been agile as a subscription business, and one that has to espouse and support our customers who also have subscription businesses, right? Agility is key, but that doesn't mean you don't plan. It actually means that you plan more. And we've actually upped our planning 3 months ahead because we want to know what all those levers are, so that when something happens, we already know what series of decisions we have to make. So we're very quick about that. So definitely our operational planning is definitely going to stay. The other one that's going to continue to stick is continue to think about how we communicate and engage across our global company. It's interesting because we've been talking a lot about how people may be feeling disengaged and isolated. A lot of our permanent employees have actually said, I actually feel more engaged because we've had to set the level playing field in terms of communication, and it's effective communication. And I want to make sure that we continue to keep that even level playing field when it comes to access to information, having that context, because it has just continued to accelerate our ability to execute and take it up a notch. So those are the two things that come to mind in terms of those two things are never going backwards.
Awesome. Olivia, take us home.
Yeah, well, first of all, I 100% agree with Daisy very much. How we're thinking about it. We are making this shift to virtual first. And so it's now a permanent shift into that paradigm. And so how do we think about across our employee base engagement? How do we take advantage of the level playing field? It's actually one of the key reasons we did it is we really wanted to operate as a global company and have everyone feeling like they were equal contributing parts of the team. And frankly, the part that I'm most excited about is the access to diverse talent, because all of a sudden we get to hire the best marketer, the best salesperson, the best engineer, the best product person in Kentucky. I mean, it really doesn't matter to us where people are. And so for us, that means an amazing opportunity to hire diverse talent and get thinking that we otherwise wouldn't get into kind of that melting pot that is innovation at Dropbox. So I would say that's the one that I'm really, really excited for. I would also say there's been a distinct shift in our customer relationships. Like this has been a time where it's true partnering, right? It is, again, going back to that human element that as we work with our customers, more than ever, we're trying to solve their business needs, but in a very human partnering relationship. And I think that now those relationships have been made And now it's clear that kind of we're all working on the same team, and we're trying to enable them as a business and then their customers in their own right. I do really hope that that continues in that vein, that true partnership with our customers, because I think it's really important and special. And then more broadly, just to what Daisy said, like, I think the way we think about communication will fundamentally shift. The level of transparency, the understanding that as you give certainty to your employees, the more productive they are, the more engaged they feel. And I think that no matter whether people are going into the office or not, we will have fundamentally shifted how we engage as a team, like as a team of people working at the same company.
Awesome. Well, you both just did an extraordinary job of capturing a lot of insights in 45 minutes. I'm super duper grateful for that. Again, know how busy you are. These roles are big roles in big companies that are doing really interesting things. So really appreciate you taking time to share these insights with some great entrepreneurs who are trying to kind of follow your lead and build the next Zora and the next Dropbox. So thank you guys. I really appreciate it, and hope to see you in person soon. And hope you can join us for some of the other panels that are coming down the pike the rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This has been great.
And thank you for throwing this conference. It's
Awesome.
a special event. So yeah, take care, everyone.
Cool. All right.
Take care,
Take care, everyone. See ya.